All right, folks, we're back here in the Sports Talk Nation. Michael Cohen here with you. I'm, of course, joined by my special guest, John Pielli. So we just talked about the Yankees-A's playoff game and the stupidity of the opener that was part of that game that the A's tried to pull off and blew up in their face. So now we're going to move on. Yankees moving on to the Red Sox. So let's rejoin this conversation that John Pielli and I had. Now we get ready for the Yankees and the Red Sox, and let's be honest. I mean, a lot of pressure now is going to be squarely on Boston, having won 108 games this year, basically with a cakewalk in this division, which is hard to say when you think about what the Yankees and even the Rays have done this year, but that's how far off the Red Sox were in this division, just kind of waltzed right through the division from August on out, and now all the pressure is on them in this 5-game series, which is absolutely going to be incredible to watch.
No, it is. And listen, Boston deserves a lot of credit for the season they have. They were the best team in a regular season. Unfortunately, the way baseball is set up right now, the best team in a regular season gets no extra bonus for doing so. Mm-hmm. But I would say the biggest thing for the Boston Red Sox, and I think this is going to be so important, I don't say this too often, the Red Sox got to find a way to win Game 1. Mm-hmm. Because I think if they lose one of the 2 games in Boston, they're going to be in a very compromised position. I think the Red Sox, of course, they've known their fate for a while. They've known that they're going to be that number 1 seed. They've basically had more than a month to prepare for this 5-game series. Having a feeling it might have been against the Yankees, but not knowing for sure, they just knew they were going to be there. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be interesting to see how Boston is able to perform now that the games mean something, because they haven't played a game that's meant anything for a little while. You look at the 3-game series they had against the Yankees, nobody was trying in that game. Both of the teams could have cared less about the results. So now all of a sudden Boston is going from about a month and a half where they really haven't had anything to play for to all of a sudden the games mean something. So I'm interested to see when I watch this first game how Boston is able to click it into gear and perform when all of a sudden the games mean something.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, this is a huge game. I mean, you have J.A. Happ, who has pitched pretty well against the Red Sox throughout the course of this season. His last outing was kind of rough, but again, it was towards the end of the year against Chris Sale. Now, it's been a long time since the Yankees have seen Sale. The last time they saw him, you got to go all the way back to June 30th. And we all know how some baseball fans, they look at recent trends, they say, J.A. Happ's pitching, so maybe the Yankees will win. Well, the last time Chris Sale faced the Yankees, he held the Bombers to just 1 hit over 7 innings. So if the Red Sox are going to get off to a good start, this has to be a game where Chris Sale goes out there and absolutely dominates the Yankees from pillar to post. That's the best way they can get off to a good start here, because just the prospect of David Price, who has had his issues against the Yankees in a Game 2, I would have guessed against CC Sabathia, that's just my guess, or maybe Masahiro Tanaka. That's really a toss-up game right there. But Red Sox don't want to be down, as you said, 0-1 with Price on the hill for them against a team that's killed them.
I tell you, they have the prize there in Boston in Chris Sale, one of the best pitchers in baseball. And just having him would seem like it would be a great asset. Unfortunately, Chris Sale has had his injury issues this year. The guy who was looking like a lock to win the Cy Young early on in the season has had a couple lengthy DL stints. And since he's come back, he hasn't necessarily been pushed. So the question is, coming into Game 1, is Chris Sale going to be able to provide the length that, the average Boston Red Sox fan would expect from Chris Sale on a given day? Now, if he does, that's great. But if not, you're looking at a situation where maybe Eduardo Rodriguez or Stephen Wright may have to pitch, in the mid-innings of that game, and I think that, certainly works in the Yankees' favor. And if they get into bullpen versus bullpen, a tight game, 3-3 going into the 7th, the 8th, or the 9th inning, the Boston Red Sox, I know they got the one pitcher, Brazier, who's come in there and done a great job. He was kind of a cast-off. I read the great story about him sending, open letters to all 30 teams, for a chance to compete in spring training. He ends up making the Red Sox roster and has been a very integral part of their bullpen. Craig Kimbrell in a big game has been questionable. He's probably been the best or most consistent, end game pitcher in baseball the last, 5 to 7 years. But, he hasn't had a track record of being able to show up in a big game. His numbers against the Yankees are not great. They're not dominant like they are against most other teams. So, you look at it and you hope that the Red Sox, the one advantage that they may seem to have coming into the series may be the ability for their starting pitchers to provide length. And if they do that, I think they'll have a very good chance. If not, if it becomes a battle of the bullpens, I think it's going to be I think it's going to be easy for the Yankees. I think the Yankees could finish this in 4 games if it becomes a battle of the bullpen and the Red Sox starters are not able to provide enough length, especially in the first 2 games of the series.
Keep in mind, the Red Sox, one thing the Red Sox are going to talk about is that the last 2 series they played against the Yankees in September really didn't. They're going to try to downplay those 2 series because they're going to say, well, the division was over and maybe we took the foot off the gas, and they're going to keep pointing to the series that the 2 teams played in August where Boston swept them 4 games. But keep in mind, that was a different Yankee team back then because that was a Yankee team that was beaten up with injuries. They didn't have Aaron Judge in the lineup. Didi Gregorius was in and out. We didn't have Luke Voit here at this point in time. Yankees were struggling trying to figure out what to do with Sanchez and Greg Bird. And now this Yankee team comes in here a completely different team than where they were when if you want to say that August series was the last real serious series between these 2 teams, a completely different Yankee team and a healthier Yankee team than they had the last time. So lineup-wise, the Yankees are going to match up very well pound for pound against this Red Sox team. And as you said, if this goes into the bullpen, it will be really a toss-up for that matter in my mind. I think the Yankees have to at least get through 5 innings with their starters, especially guys like CC Sabathia, Masahiro Tanaka, who at times have been up and down. Even Severino has had his ups and downs throughout the course of the year. They've got to get through, at least in my mind, 5 innings. But chances are with this rivalry and the way these 2 teams play, we'll probably see these starters go maybe 4 innings before they go to the bullpens in this game. It just has that kind of feel to it.
Yeah, you look at 2 great offenses, and the one thing I'm going to focus on Boston for a second. You mentioned that series that they played in August when the Red Sox swept them. And yes, the Yankees were a little bit compromised, but also Boston was playing their absolute best baseball. I mean, if they had that kind of poise that a great team has that you're just not going to lose. And you got the sense, even when games were tight late, that you sensed that Boston was going to find a way to figure it out. Now, going back to what I said before about, the Red Sox not having much to play for a while, hope is that Boston can get themselves back at that level. I mean, if offensively they're clicking on all cylinders like they were for the first, 4+ months of the season, then I like their chances. But, I want to see Boston get back to that elite level that they were playing for the majority of the season. And if they do that, I put them up there, against anybody. I think they have the best team in the American League if everybody is clicking on all cylinders.
Hey, look, the key for the Yankees is going to be this. They got to find a way to slow down Mookie Betts and J.D. Martinez. If they can do that, they're going to have a great shot in this series. Because you take a look at that offense for the Red Sox, I'm just looking at the numbers, just looking at the numbers without having to do any calculations. At least 20% of that offense is those 2 guys. So when you think about that, if you can slow that down just a little bit, the Yankees have a great chance in this series.
No, that's going to be big. I mean, you're going to have to find, and I'm sure through the analytics staff and stuff for the Yankees, they're going to look at trying to figure out the best way to pitch those guys. But what the rest of baseball has realized, sometimes it's tough.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Martinez looks like the MVP in the American League. Betts, won the batting title. I mean, these are ridiculously tough hitters to get out. So I don't know if there's a formula or anything or any way that they can pitch them to, sure that there's going to be better results. These are guys that are going to take their rips, and they're great players for a reason. And they certainly, carry the Boston Red Sox. And you also see that a lot of the players around them, the other players, the Kinslers, the Bogartses, the catchers, the other players that come up there through the lineup, feed off of the big guys. And when they're being pitched a certain way, it certainly impacts the way that the other players in the lineup are going to get pitched. They're going to see more fastballs. The Red Sox are very aggressive on the bases, which is going to kind of keep the pitcher off his game. He's got to worry about, guys trying to steal bases off of him. It's Alex Cora's philosophy. Take that extra base when you can. Don't do it recklessly. Don't steal like Ricky Henderson or Ty Cobb when they said, hey, I don't care if I get caught. I'm going to run. Calculate the times where you move. So, the Red Sox have like a lot of depth in that lineup, and the depth is certainly based off of players who are made out a lot better because of the big players that they got, the Betts and the Martinez.
Absolutely. So before we move on to the other series, we take a look at who we like in these matchups that are coming up, especially that fantastic Cleveland-Houston matchup. I got to run this by you because with regards to the Chicago Cubs, what I saw the last couple of days, them losing to the Brewers in the NL Central Championship 3-1, and then losing to the Rockies in a wild card game. We always talk about this with teams in different sports, whether it be basketball, baseball, football, hockey for that matter, teams that were supposed to go out there and win multiple championships. And I look at this Cubs team, the way they've been built over the last 4 years now, this was a team that should have won, in my mind, more than just the one World Series they did in 2016. They lost to the Mets. A lot of people thought they were better than the Mets in 2015. Mets swept them. They lost to the Dodgers last year. A lot of people thought they were both kind of on an even playing field last year. And then losing to the Brewers, really blowing it in the Central, and then losing to the Brewers, and then losing to the Rockies the other day. A team that, again, two teams that everyone thought the Cubs were better than. To me, this is really gone from a great story, which it was a couple of years ago, to being a slight disappointment because this team could have, should have, and with the talent they have, probably should have won more than just one World Series.
The one thing I compare it to is I think of the Texas Rangers. Remember the Texas Rangers got to the World Series in 2010 and 2011, and in 2012 they were well on their way to winning the AL West. They had a little bit of a stumble in September, ended up having to play in a wild card game, and then they lost the wild card game. Mm-hmm. After that, that was kind of the end of that team's run. I think the Cubs are too talented. They have too much depth. They have too many very good young players in a prime of their career to be completely done. Mm-hmm. But I tell you, it's got to, like you said, it's got to be a disappointment for the Cubs to have their season be finished so far, especially the way that they tooled themselves up. They added themselves a Cole Hamels. They added Jesse Chavez. They were very aggressive in regards to getting themselves more depth to get themselves set for the postseason. Now they got to look at a long winter and try to figure out what they should expect for this team going forward. I don't think you'd say this is the end of the run. I just think there's too much talent there. But I tell you, you'll get parity in baseball. The fact that there's all these teams that are not necessarily, front runners, not necessarily, juggernauts the way that they're built from top to bottom.
Yep.
That are giving themselves very good chances to win. I look at the Brewers and I look at the Rockies, and I don't think either one of those teams are in the postseason by any joke or any fluke. I think they've built themselves very well. And I think they could compete with just about anybody. So that's something that a team like the Cubs, or even the Dodgers for that matter, have to look at going forward. There's a lot of really good teams, and I think as we get set for 2019, which we got plenty of time to talk about that, but as we get set for 2019, you have more teams that are going to get better. And there's going to be a ton of parity in baseball in both the National and the American League. So that chance to have that dynasty and just run off a series of World Series championships, I don't know if it's going to happen. It may happen through a fluke, but I don't think it's going to happen because one team is so superior to the other.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the National League, it was so tight this year. There really was no one dominant team out of the National League. I mean, we're sitting there watching the Dodgers this year, and I think everyone's wondering, okay, when are the Dodgers going to get going? When are they going to start to turn it on? And they never really did, and of course, they went right to the last day with the Colorado Rockies for the division title. Same thing can be said for the Cubs. Everyone's wondering, when are they going to turn it on? Never happened. So you take a look at the National League, it's really tight. Even teams that didn't make the playoffs this year, like the Cardinals, turned it on in the second half of the year. Even the Mets, for that matter. I know it's just a horrible season this year, especially in June, but they started to play better at the end of the year. So you take a look moving forward to 2019, National League, I don't know who's going to come out of this thing for this year, but it's wide open moving forward into next year in the National League.
No, it definitely is, and obviously, if you want to focus on what's the teams that are in it right now.
Yeah.
I honestly listen. I look at the Braves, and I think that they're deserved. to be in the playoffs in the position they are. Obviously, you're dealing with a lot of young players there. That's the only thing. Sometimes when you got a group of young players experiencing the postseason for the first time, you may have to go through some growing pains with it, because obviously postseason baseball is different than playing in a regular season. But listen, I mean, you're seeing a lot of great young talent. A lot of these teams that have kind of taken a step ahead of what the curve would say in regards to expectations of when their particular rebuilds are supposed to finish. They're able to perform at high levels because the young players are getting into Major League Baseball sooner.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing guys come up at age 20, 21, 22, and they're ready. They're Major League ready when they come up. It's not like a typical player that you have to see, let's say a Mike Schmidt with the Phillies, when he first came up years ago, that he'd have to struggle through a season and then all of a sudden pick it up in years 2 through 3, and the 4th or 5th year he's a superstar. These guys are coming in with the tools and ready to compete at a high level right away. And that's just going to speak for a lot of fun baseball to see.
Absolutely.
It's really hard to see what team in each particular league is so much better than the other, because I don't think there's much of a difference at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we take a look at these series, these two series out of the National League. I mean, the Milwaukee-Colorado series is pretty even. I mean, neither team is going to scare anybody with his pitching. It's all about the offense. I mean, you take a look at Milwaukee with Christian Yelich and Jesus Aguilar, as well as Travis Shaw. All the numbers those guys have been putting up this year. Yelich could be the National League MVP this year when it's all said and done. And then you take a look at Colorado with Arenado and Trevor Story. I mean, there's going to be a lot of runs scored in that series. I mean, that's a series that I could definitely see that going 5 games just because of the way these two teams are built offensively.
Yeah, I agree with you up to a point, but I'm going to disagree with you on this one issue. I think Colorado has finally come up with a formula to be able to develop young pitchers that are able to pitch to the elements in Coors Field. And they are, you look at Freeland and Marquez in particular, they're guys that seem to have figured it out. And they've developed them through their own system. And I actually like the Colorado Rockies pitching staff. Now, if you go to their bullpen, guys like Brian Shaw and Jake McGee have been, straight up bad this year. Wade Davis, has had some great years with Kansas City and then the Cubs last year, hasn't been his complete self. So I do think the Brewers have a chance to get to their bullpen, but I think the Rockies, for the first time in their franchise history in 25 years, have actually come up with a formula to be able to get some length out of starters that they've developed with their own farm system. And I think they have a little bit of an advantage coming up against the Milwaukee Brewers there, even as good as that Brewers offense is.
And Kyle Freeland looked fantastic the other day against Chicago. I mean, he was just brilliant, giving up only 4 hits over 6 2/3. I mean, he looked good. And of course, German Marquez has had a solid year for them. So yeah, I could definitely I see where you're coming from with that one. The Rockies could certainly make a move and try to upset the Brewers in this series. I'm getting the sense that you're thinking that they could win this series or may win this series.
I think they can. I mean, I really do. I mean, you think of the tradition with Colorado Rockies and their offense. Their offense is going to be fine. They're going to be able to score runs with anybody. They got the length in that lineup. Even a guy like David Dahl has had a really good second half this year. Nobody really knows much about him, but he's gone out there and hit. You still got Cargo there, who really isn't himself, but Ian Desmond has had a pretty good season. The breakout season that Trevor Story has had. Arenado has been Arenado. LeMahieu. They obviously have the length. Charlie Blackmon. So this is a lineup that is going to compete against anybody. The question he always had about the Rockies is their pitching going to be good enough? Now, I understand the elements of Coors Field can be an issue, and that's why I think the relievers, no matter who it is that they bring in there, they could bring in Kimball and Chapman, and they'll probably still have similar type of issues when it comes to pitching in those type of elements. You can't command your fastball. The breaking stuff ends up hanging a lot more in that type of altitude. So I look at the Rockies and I say if there's a chance that they have to make a run to the World Series, it's going to be this year.
There you go. And then the other series, you got the Dodgers and the Atlanta Braves. Now the Braves have had a really solid year this year, but I have to give an edge here to the Dodgers based on experience, based on the fact that they've been here just last year. And, of course, look, you still got Clayton Kershaw in this rotation. You still have a guy who just a year ago had a chance to be Rookie of the Year, if not MVP, and Cody Bellinger. I know he's had a tougher year this year, but I have to like the Dodgers going into this game, into this series, I should say, to find a way to at least pull out of it in four games against Atlanta.
Yeah, listen, I don't disagree. I mean, I think the biggest issue the Atlanta Braves are going to have to deal with is their inexperience.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be a great moment for the Braves and their fans to see these young players end up, not just Acuna and Albies, but, Fultonavich and Newcomb. They got a lot of very good core young players. Mm-hmm. And listen, they may catch lightning in a bottle. They may play with, that type of tenacity where, nothing really matters and they'll just go for it. And, may play with the feeling that they got nothing to lose, which could help them. But I like the Dodgers. I mean, this is a team that is won 6 straight National League West titles, and it's been no fluke. They've won it because, for the most part, they've been the best team. I know they've had a battle with it this year. They've had a lot of injuries. You look at a guy like Corey Seager being lost very early on in the season. Kershaw hasn't been out there that much. They've gotten a lot of contributions from different guys this year. Max Muncy, the 35 home runs he's hit. Mm-hmm. Walker Buehler, the number 1 pick in the draft a couple of years ago. Pitching as well as he's been pitching. And listen, I look at the advantage in the dugout. And I look at a guy like Dave Roberts, who is a legitimate baseball guy, man. This guy gets it. He understands it from an analytics standpoint. He understands it from the player standpoint. He's in my opinion, one of the top 2 or 3 managers in all of Major League Baseball. And in a postseason, listen, we could question how much control the manager has, mm-hmm. but I do think a great manager or a manager that is superior to the manager in the other dugout, I think can make a difference in a series. So I look at many different advantages that the Dodgers have, and if there's one of the 4 series that are coming up that I think may go the shortest in regards to length of games, I do think it's Dodgers-Braves, and I do favor the Dodgers by a lot. Yeah,
I do as well. I mean, you even have guys like Rich Hill who have been pitching great this year. I mean, they've got a lot of standout performances, and they get Rue back, of course, late in the year. He's been great, and he's going to pitch in this game 1. So I agree with you. I think the Dodgers are going to take care of business fairly quickly against the Braves. Now, the series that is absolutely fantastic, and it's going to go under the radar because the Yankees Red Sox is going to be Astros and Indians, and its reason's fantastic is because of the starting pitching. You get Kluber against Verlander game 1. Get Carrasco against Cole game 2. Clevenger against Keuchel game 3. I mean, it's just there's so many different ways you can match up these pitchers, and it's a good game either way. So that's really where this series is going to come down to, is the starting pitching. But for me, the Houston Astros, they got to 103 wins, and a lot of people have kind of forgotten about them. Everyone's talking about the Red Sox. Everyone's talking about the Yankees. No one talked about the Astros towards the second half of the year. Maybe it's because they won it all last year, but they lost only 5 games in the month of September. Just 5 games. So, to me, they come in here riding ahead of steam going into this postseason, and the fact that they've already been here, done that, gives them a slight edge, at least in this series, against a team that's also very good in Cleveland.
No, very true, and I think you're right spot on in regards to them kind of almost being overlooked in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a team that's probably played its best baseball in September, has got one of the legitimate American League MVP candidates in Alex Bregman. Guy has 50 doubles, 30 home runs, has become a star in his own right. They got Altuve, they got Correa. You know about the starters. You add Garrett Cole to the mix, who wasn't there last year.
Yep.
And you also got a very good closer in Roberto Osuna. Now, we could talk about his off-the-field issues. Listen, I don't think it's that big of a deal when we're talking about baseball right now. He gives them a better chance to get through a 9th inning than Ken Giles did, and that's a fact, period.
Yes.
So, I look at this Astros team, and the team that won the World Series last year, I actually think is better this year than it was last year. Mm-hmm. Now, you look at the Cleveland Indians, I think, they could also be considered under the radar. They've had a very good season. They've had a very good run. Their pitching is going to match up very well with what the Houston Astros are going to throw out there. The question is going to be, what is Cleveland going to get out of their offense? The Lindors and the Jose Ramirez's of the world. Even guys that are, of lesser echelon, like Michael Brantley and Yonder Alonso and Yan Gomes. what are they going to get out of these guys over the course of the series? Because if the Indians are struggling, in regards to hitting, I think the Astros, from an offensive standpoint, can hit great pitching, let alone good pitching, which is what the Indians have. So, listen, I wouldn't rule out the Indians. I almost want to say that I think the Indians can win this series, and that's why I think it could go 5. But I look at the Astros, and I just think that they're much better than they were last year. And coming off of that World Series, they were anointed, they were put up on a pedestal, the world champions, the whole thing. Not too many World Series champions actually get better the next season. And I think the Astros, not just from a player standpoint in regards to getting better personnel, but they just seem like a better team than they were last year.
Yeah, the thing that worries me about Cleveland, and as good as their starting pitching is, and they got 4 great starters as it is the fact that they have a bullpen that, to me, is a couple rungs below where they were 2 years ago. Cody Allen, I know, is a solid closer in this game as it comes, but a 4.5 ERA worries me in this kind of series. And the fact that Andrew Miller missed a big chunk of the season, yes, he's come back in the last couple of months, but again, that worries me. The fact that their best reliever is Oliver Perez worries me. So when I put all those things together and I think about what the Astros can do offensively and the damage that they can cause offensively, and that was the big thing last year, was they reminded me, the Astros, of those Yankee teams from the 90s, is that you think that you have them down, and then all of a sudden they just put together a couple of hits, and all of a sudden the dam breaks, and they score 3, 4, 5 runs in one inning, and now you're behind. And they're that kind of team that can come back at any point in the game, and that's what has to scare you about the Astros going, if you're the Indians or anybody that has to face them in the postseason.
No, good point. And I'll tell you one thing that stands out about the Indians and their manager, Terry Francona. He's had the luxury over the last couple postseasons of having an Andrew Miller at full strength, having Cody Allen maybe in his better years, and also having Brian Shaw. I'm interested to see how that impacts how Terry Francona chooses to manage this team. Is he going to go a little further with his starting pitchers? Is he going to use a guy like, let's say, a Carlos Carrasco out of the bullpen and maybe try to get a couple innings in the middle of the game from him? He doesn't necessarily have that same benefit of being able to use, a Miller and an Allen and a Brian Shaw, which obviously Brian Shaw isn't there anymore. But you know what I'm saying, to get 4 innings or 4+ innings out of those guys. So I'm wondering if he is open-minded enough to change the way he has managed his bullpen over the last couple postseasons. Because I think if he does that, I think it's going to give the Cleveland Indians a lot better of an opportunity to succeed and potentially beat the Astros. Potentially.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of pressure on that bullpen. Middle of the game, late in game, with that offense, what they can do in that ballpark, especially in the early part of that series. So, to me, obviously, the popular theory is you got to get at least one game if you're Cleveland. You got to get out of Game 1 if you're Cleveland. You got to get out of Game 1 with a win, because if they lose this game to Verlander, if he dominates and this offense does what it's very capable of in the middle of the game, it will set the tone for a very long series for Cleveland. So for me, Game 1 is a must if you are the Cleveland Indians.
And I'll tell you, if you want to look at it optimistically for Cleveland, you could talk about the fact that Justin Verlander has spent a series of years pitching in the American League Central. His days with the Tigers, the longer tenured Indians that have been there, the Brantleys, the Lindors, the Ramirez's, have seen a lot of Justin Verlander. So, a guy who obviously has dominated in the postseason, was fantastic last year. Maybe the Indians could come up with a game plan and maybe kind of keep him off his game. Obviously, experience against pitchers, I do think means something. Guys that have seen him before. It's not like you're running a guy out, in a Justin Verlander that you may have only seen, once a year or so. There's a handful of players on this Indians team that have seen him before. So, if I like the Indians to take a game early, maybe it would be Game 1. Maybe they could rattle Verlander. Maybe they could silence the Houston crowd and maybe get it to a point where, they could take advantage and maybe steal the first game here, which would give them a better chance of winning the series.
Maybe. So before we call the show here, folks, it's time for us to make our picks. So, John, go right at it. Pick these 4 series. Who do you think is going to come out of this thing and get us to the LCSs?
Well, I hope that your listeners could kind of see the foresight that I've put in.
Oh, absolutely.
I've given a little bit of clues in regards to the teams that I think are going to win. I'm going Astros. I think Astros Indians could potentially go 5. Mm-hmm. I really think it can. I think I could see them splitting in both of the different cities and having it come down to a game 5. The Indians with Corey Kluber, will they set him up to be in a position to pitch a decisive game 5? And if he is, he's probably going on short rest. So I think that's where I'd give the advantage to the Astros. But I also just think they're a much better team. Mm-hmm. Red Sox Yankees, I think, is interesting to me for this reason, because I'm just worried that the Red Sox are just. I just think it's so hard in baseball to be able to, have the switch turned off for a little while and just crank it on at a time where it matters. And I can see the Yankees building off of their momentum and maybe finishing this series in 4. So I got the Yankees in 4. So Yankees, Astros rematch of the ALCS last year.
Nice.
NL. I think the Brewers and Rockies are, two teams that are kind of building themselves from the same position. They're both growing at the same time, getting their first collective group of postseason experience together. I know the Rockies played in the postseason last year, but it was only one game. I think this is a series that can go 5, and I'm giving the advantage to the Rockies because of their starting pitching. And that's something that I don't think I ever expected I'd say in my lifetime. And I think we're both on the same page with the Dodgers and the Braves. Yep. I think the Dodgers could sweep. I'm going to give the Braves a little credit and go Dodgers in 4. So I got Dodgers, Rockies, and LCS.
There you go. So those are John's picks. So let me jump into this. And regarding the I'll start with the National League first. I think Rockies and Brewers is a complete toss-up. I agree with you that the Rockies do have a slight advantage in the starting pitching, but the one thing that I'm going to lean heavily into the Brewers here is the fact that they have the home field. 2, they do have a couple of veteran guys in there in the starting rotation that they can rely on, that can give them some innings and can get to that bullpen. So to me, it's going to be basically a shootout with these two teams. I think it will go 5 games. I will take the Brewers to outlast the Rockies in 5. National League, the other series, Dodgers and Braves. I love the Dodgers in this series. Experience. You got Kershaw. You got a couple other guys in the rotation like Hill and Rue who have had career years this year. You have Bellinger coming off of a rough season, but I think he'll play well this year in the playoffs. There's just too much Dodgers. The Braves, a good young story coming out of a weak division. Not going to be enough. I like the Dodgers in 4 in that series, so I got Dodgers and Brewers coming out of the National League. And then the American League, you and I are sharing a brain because I agree with you. I like the Houston Astros to take care of the Cleveland Indians. Again, experience, fact that they have so much pitching, both in the starting rotation, bullpen, the fact they can even use starters coming out of the bullpen. It's just too many arms that are coming out of there for Houston right now. And, of course, their ability to come back at any point offensively, it's going to be a little bit too much for the Indians to handle. And also the fact that I mentioned the Indians' bullpen has some question marks going into this series. So I like Houston in 4 against the Indians. And the Yankees and Red Sox, man, 5 games isn't enough for these two teams. There is so much pressure on Boston to win this series. They should win this series, and I wouldn't be shocked if they do. But if they do, they're gonna have almost no energy going into the ALCS. The Yankees are going to tax them big time. I could see the Yankees going in there and pulling out an upset, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win tomorrow against Chris Sale. That would really set the trend for the entire series if they do. 2 great offenses. There's going to be a lot of bullpen work by both of these teams, but I'll take the Yankees to win in 5. So I'm going to go, like you, Yankees, Astros in the American League, and I'm going Brewers, Dodgers in the National League.
Make 2 more points.
Sure thing.
One about the Red Sox Yankees. If for some reason, and obviously it's a hypothetical situation, there's no way it could happen, but if the Red Sox and Yankees were playing in the American League Championship Series, I would favor Boston because I think the Yankees would be at a point where they're overusing their bullpen. That's fact fair. That it's the division series, and they haven't run these guys out there as much. I know a couple of the guys got some work in yesterday against the Athletics, but I think Aaron Boone's going to have, because of the amount of weapons he has in his bullpen, the ability to not overwork them over the course of a 5-game series. I don't think he'll have that same luxury if the Yankees are fortunate enough to get to the championship series. Last point I want to make
sure
is,
thing.
Last year was a big story for the Houston Astros, winning the World Series. Obviously, everything with the Hurricane Harvey and stuff like that. But the thing that kind of got me as a historian and a big-time baseball fan myself is the Astros crossed their team name off of a list. They won their first World Series. You're looking at a series of teams now, which is just down to 7, that have never won a World Series in Major League Baseball history. 2 of them are still alive in the postseason and happen to be playing each other in the division series in Milwaukee and Colorado. So if I have a soft spot for a team, whether it's Colorado or Milwaukee, that I wouldn't mind seeing being crossed off of that list of 7 teams, it would be the Rockies or the Brewers for that reason. And, of course, the other 5 teams are San Diego, Washington, Tampa Bay, Seattle, and Texas. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to see as many teams win their first World Series. Great for the team, great for the fan base, great for the individual cities that they represent, and just all have their moment and be able to look back in baseball history and say, hey, remember that year where we won the entire thing.
And don't forget, there's there's always the chance we could end up with the Astros and the Brewers in the World Series, which would have a historical significance from the standpoint that these are 2 teams that were once in the other league and now facing each other, then potentially in the World Series.
So, there's very few of us that'll find the fascination in that, and I just think it's incredible that could happen.
Mm-hmm. That's that would be. I guess you could call that the Thanks Bud Selig World Series. that's
why Bud Selig got in the Hall of Fame, because he moved the Brewers to the National League.
Exactly. Anyway, John, well, thank you so much, man. This is going to be good baseball here.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. Listen, I hope you enjoy yourself. There's obviously postseason setting itself up for some exciting games day in and day out. My favorite time of the year. I know it's one of yours as well. And we'll definitely talk soon, Mike.
Yep, we'll certainly talk soon. Certainly in the next couple of weeks as we get some more baseball and we start to head towards the off season, man.
All right, take it easy, Mike.
Take care. All right, folks, that's John Pielli of the Pass Ball Show, and we thank him for joining us today. So there you go, folks. Your baseball postseason is set. It's going to be a good one, folks. We look forward to bringing it to you. Of course, we'll follow it regularly here on the Open Mic program. Remember to follow us here on the Sports Talk Nation. Remember to follow us here on the Sports Talk Nation, right here on YouTube. Like and subscribe right here, and also follow us on social media at Open Mic NJ on Twitter, Facebook.com/Open Mic Program. Michael Cohen, signing out.